Okay, we've got the top of the hour and we're going to get started because we've got a lot of great speakers. Hey everybody, I'm Jennifer Ahmanson. I'm the Assistant Executive Director of COCA. Thank you for joining us today, and it's great to see some of you back at this hour who were on the first hour with us at noon Eastern, and glad to have some new folks as well. COCA Academy is already rocking, so let's get this started. Hattie, take it away, please.
Perfect. Well, welcome everyone. For those of you that I don't know, my name is Hattie Johnson. I am the Region 1 Director for COCA and was the presenter earlier this morning. So this is a great follow-up. What our plan is for the COCA Academy is to really, for the first session of the day, is to talk about the concepts, the best practices, everything you need to know about the subject matter, and then have, because the theme of the conference is connect and celebrate, is to celebrate some camp success. And so we didn't want them to just join us and talk about how successful they were, because that doesn't do us any good. We want to celebrate with them, but we also want them to be able to share with you what challenges did they face, what pro tips can they share with you, so that you guys can see real life examples at COCA camps and then go back to your camp and take those ideas. And also just the main theme of that, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's already there. Camps are already doing it. They've been really successful. So let's use our network and our resources to reach out to those camps and ask questions, because I said this earlier this morning, any question that you have, they probably had it and they probably figured the answer out along the way. There's a lot of stuff that they learned because this was the first time they did a virtual event like this. And so there's lots of lessons learned that they're going to share with you today. They're going to share what platform they use to be able to roll out their program. So lots of good information. So today we have Brandon and Deanna from Camp who are going to talk about their virtual gala or gala, however you'd like to say it. We have Ryan from Happiness is Camping to talk to you guys about their virtual walk that they did. And if I'm correct, Ryan will share that they did not previously have a walk, correct? You did a virtual walk for the first time this year. And then Juliana from Campout, who they did a Campout. So I am so excited that we just have so many wonderful people within COCA who are doing really great things. And so each camp is going to have about 15 minutes to share all of this with you. Please keep in mind, we'll at the very end, we'll give, if the time allows, we'll give an opportunity to ask questions. If we run out of time, we'll give you an opportunity to type your questions in the chat box at the very end, and we'll be sure to follow up and answer those questions. So, so Deanna and Brandon, if you guys want to share your screen and get started, we'd love to hear all about your virtual gala that you recently did.
Great, and most of you know me from COCA. I've been around for about 20 years in COCA. Brandon Briery, Chief Program Officer at Camp, Children's Association for Maximum Potential. Our mission is to serve children and adults with special or individuals with special needs and those who care for them through recreation, respite, and education. So broader than just cancer, we serve a broad population, but I'm going to introduce you to our Chief Development Officer, Deanna Hopkins, who is going to be the star of our next 15 minutes. And she, along with her team and our development team and our gala committee, are really the superstars that put together our most financially successful gala ever. I'm gonna let Deanna take it away. Okay. I'm gonna get the slides up. Hold on.
There we go. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Deanna Hopkins. So this is just so you can see some of the branding that we did. We have held annual camp gala, gosh, this will be the 12th year, but the 11 years prior were very different. They were all the in-person event that is held at the San Antonio Country Club. It's very formal. There's the sit-down meal, guest speakers. We do a silent and a live auction as well as a paddle raiser. In that space, and we get a very good deal with the country club, but in that space, we could only hold up to 400 people. And tickets were about $250 each, but we were almost sold out every year by the time invitations went out, simply because our sponsors filled most of those seats. Now, this is a picture of the ballroom fairly empty. By the time you put 400 people in there, it was really tight. Overall, it was not the most community-friendly event. It really was helpful for us to be able to showcase to our donors what was going on, but it didn't lend itself to just the average person attending and hearing that same message. 2019 was the highest grossing year at $206,000. So now we did this year 100% online. We promoted it as a come as you are event. So some were dressed up, some wore their favorite camp shirts, others were in PJs and sitting on the couch. It was a wide variety of how people came. They held their own events in their own homes. We had the potential now to host thousands, depending on, I mean, we had no limitations. We actually increased larger sponsorships, but one of the things we noticed is that we dropped the smaller ones. So for us, a larger sponsorship would be 15,000. We had 3 where we normally only have 1. Where we struggled was the lower table sponsors, because suddenly there was no table, so it didn't make as much sense. It was certainly a more COVID and community friendly event, which we were very proud of. And in the end, we ended up with right at 1,000 people, just over 1,000 people watching. And 2020 was now the highest grossing year at $220,000. And I want to tell you kind of what we did different and some glitches along the way. So overall, we did a huge evaluation process, and basically what I challenged not only our team, but our CEO and the leadership in our gala committee, and said, put a new lens on. What does this need to look like? And I think for all of us, we get into the same routine, and that's very difficult. So that was one of the most important people. Lauren, one of my colleagues, and I went and talked to a ton of other camps and other nonprofits around the country that have been doing galas virtually or doing a hybrid approach of virtual and in person, and really listened to what nonprofits around the country were saying and what their success and their hiccups were. And so we learned quite a bit. And that new lens helped us with just a new perspective of what does a new donor potentially want to see with this, but also what do our current donors and what does a community member want to learn out of this? So from there, we determined what our critical needs were. And there were 3 things that we identified that camp really needed to focus in on. The first one is that we wanted the community to be the primary focus. And that's a little different from what we've done before, where the donor was the primary focus and we were really, having this very formal event. The second thing was the fundraising, especially in light of the financial hits we've had this year. We really needed to focus in on and make sure that we raised the money we needed. Finally, we wanted to connect with our sponsors, and for us, this was an event to really showcase this past year and inform them of what's coming up, and I think we did that fairly well. So taking those 3 objectives, we then talked about the timing. Normally in a gala, we're sitting in a sit-down meal for a couple of hours. It's a lengthy program. It's, the time and time again thing that most of us have done. We determined from listening to other folks, 45 minutes was the max. 30 minutes is ideal. So how do you share that mission in such a short time period? And again, I think it was a healthy challenge for us to look at. Many of our partnering agencies on this timing too were moving gala from summertime into the fall. And the time that we scheduled the gala was originally September 12th. And found out that we would be competing with a lot of other nonprofits in the community. In addition to that, our local Giving Day, Big Give, which is a regional giving day, they moved from the spring to 2 days before our original date. So we were kind of like, we don't have a choice here. We've got to move this. So we actually bumped our gala up by 2 weeks and did it at the end of August. And we heard a lot of negative. We had a lot of folks, especially some on the committee, that were saying we can't lose that timing, that we can't mess this up by moving it forward. But you know what? We found out it really worked out well for us and we weren't competing. So 29th of August was our final date, so just 2 weeks early. The next thing we looked at were our sponsors. Now we had a number of sponsors already in place before we decided to make the switch over. And the big thing we had to do is make sure we called all these sponsors and give them the option to have their money back. And I will tell you that we had such an outpouring of love and support over this whole entire situation. And most of our sponsors said, no way, keep it. I'm thrilled. We don't have to fill a table. We don't have to show up to a formal event. So we had some really great positive feedback, but we were also prepared to refund if needed. And then we got creative with our sponsor packages. So we had already sent out sponsor packages, but it was for an in-person event. And now suddenly none of that made a lot of sense. And so we got really creative. We branded some trays of s'mores that were delivered to each of the major sponsors. And they even had little sternos in them so they could roast marshmallows. Brandon came over one night and created a campfire signature drink for us that were all branded and then delivered out to sponsors. We just kind of got creative, and it forced us to look in a different way at what we were doing for the sponsors. And finally, the budget. We had to greatly modify our budget. We looked at our priorities and determined storytelling was the most important to us at this point. So we added more funding in for videos and day of technical support. Videos were designed so that we could use them for the gala, but also we could use them year round, making our investment go that much further. Typically, we have about $60,000 in expenses, but we didn't have the $100 per person meal to deal with this year. So in 2020, we had just under $20,000 in expenses, but it included those sponsor gifts, which were minimal, the new website that we designed for this, which I'm going to tell you about in a minute, and the production of all new videos, and the live feed the day of. And I want to add here that our expenses included collateral that we get to use now year round. And that was really important to us. So software, and I'm going to give you guys some links at the end of this that you can go and take a look at. We looked at a lot of different options. Our personal top 3 that we really were debating against, 32 Auctions was one, Excel Events was another, and then Greater Giving. Now for us, Greater Giving made the most sense because we had already been using that platform. And we knew the ins and outs of it. So for us, it was just easier to stick with what we knew. But what we determined was that there really wasn't one platform out there that did everything we wanted. And so let me give you our list here of what we wanted. We wanted a silent auction. We wanted a raffle. We wanted the paddle raiser. And we definitely wanted to seamlessly integrate the presenter. So that was all critical for us. And not one of those places really does that. Excel Events was probably the closest, but for us, their per person fees of the $2 to $4 per person made it not as community friendly for us. So our solution was to build out our own internal website, and you can go and take a look at it. It's gala.campcamp.org. All of a sudden I spaced it. Brandon and I have that background knowledge, so it was easy for us to just go in and do that. Not everyone will have that, but if you've got the capacity to do it, for us, that was the glue that made it all come together. And then finally, we looked at software. Let's see, there we go. I'm sorry, it's not software, partnerships. We were very lucky in that we had an existing relationship with a videographer. I've heard that day of expenses can run you anywhere from $5,000 to $14,000. I would encourage you to shop around. With our partnership, we were able to go back to our current videographer company and ask them to do this for us. They charged us $1,000, but we put them in as a sponsor. So 3 critical things that I really can't encourage you to do enough. One is that we pre-filmed what we could, and we really showcased the impact to the community and not us. So what was the impact to the people around us, and how did that impact come back to camp? Website, we did a dedicated website. We branded it, and it was key for the night of. Everything streamed through the website, as well as on YouTube and Facebook. With our community, we did invitations, we did some postcards, we did do social media campaigns, and the campaigns ranged from everything from fun little things like be formal if you want, or be silly if you want, and sit on your couch in your pajamas. We did all that.
I got to throw in one of Deanna's fun little things was come to the No Fancy Pants Gala.
Oh, I have that coming up next. Okay, here, I'll show you.
Sorry.
No, this is good. This is my favorite. You're invited to the No Fancy Pants Gala. Forget the fancy tux and ditch those high heels. 2020 Gala is going virtual. So we did a whole bunch of, like a series of these to just engage folks a little bit more. The kind of the go time and the takeaway here is we had to trust our team to deliver what they were supposed to do. That was hard for me. I'm a little type A, and hard, for me to really, really fully trust a contracted team to come out there and make the go time work, but it did. Platform diversity was important. Again, Facebook, YouTube, streaming it into our website, all of those pieces were really important. We kept it short, so right under 45 minutes. We scripted it and we practiced that script, including where people were gonna sit. And we expected things to go wrong, and they did. We had hiccups like none of us knew that if you do not have 1,000 followers on YouTube, you cannot stream live even though you're paying for that subscription. So little things like that, just know that they're gonna happen, but then have a plan in place. And for us, we ended up with 3 staff members that managed a email that night, that if you had any kind of technical problems or needed some support, you could send in a quick email, and within a minute they would be calling back saying, how can I help you? And I love this quote, it's always the simple that produces the marvelous. And it was true. We really made this very simple, but we took the time to plan it. We realized that storytelling is key. We established a network of support, and we didn't undervalue virtual events. And the pre-filming is definitely underrated. I think we had some negative feedback at the beginning that, oh, it's a virtual event, it's not going to do as well. And that was just certainly not true. The pre-filming, I have to say, is probably the easiest way that we kept the timing down, and we really made sure that our message was clear. I wanted to give you guys a couple of resources. I put a couple of the software packages up there, the names. Every organization is going to have a different need. And so really going through those and evaluating what your needs are going to be very, very critical. There's also a postcard mailer. I don't know if you guys do anything with this, but the mailer is a very cheap and easy way to get the message out there. In our case, we were able to do a free event in the end. And the postcard mailer dropped to different zip codes was pretty important, because we were able to tell people about it that maybe we wouldn't have reached before. Brandon and I are always here for questions, so if you have any, you're welcome to email us. And certainly if you need anything from me or my team, just holler.
Thank you both so much. This is excellent. It's almost like we rehearsed what we talked about this morning. You just put into action and implemented it. And I swear to all of you, we didn't talk about this prior to, but it's really nice to see that just sort of the general best practices and things like that. You guys really put all of those into play and had a really successful event. So thank you so much. Congrats on your most successful gala. That's really, really exciting. A couple things I do want to share, just GiveSmart was one of their platforms. They're the presenter tonight at 8 p.m. So keep that in mind. And One Cause was on their list too as a software, and they're presenting on October 21st. So you'll have an opportunity to be introduced to both of those platforms and software. So coming up next is Ryan from Happiness is Camping to talk about their virtual walk.
Yes, hello everybody. Thank you, Hattie. I'm also going to be complimenting your awesome presentation that you did this morning. So, we're Happiness is Camping. We are in New Jersey, and we run 5 weeks of residential summer camp. Unfortunately, we weren't able to open this year, but one of our big things is that we own our own facility, so we get a lot of funding each year through our rental group business. We needed an event. All of our events got canceled, so we did a virtual walk. Hattie mentioned earlier that we have never done a walk. We've done 2 in-person 5Ks, and you're probably thinking, well, if you've done a 5K, you've done a walk. We found that they're completely different things, and we went about them completely different ways, and I'm going to explain that in the next slide here. So our events that we do each year, we have an annual gala that was scheduled for April of this year. It normally brings in about $120,000 to $150,000 for us, and of course that was canceled. Another big thing that we do, we have teams in the New York City Marathon and the half marathon. So basically, we have 7 people that run for us in each race. They have to raise $3,000, and they often go above that. So We normally get about $40 for those races. And of course, those races were canceled this year. And the phone's ringing. The phone hasn't rang in 6 months, so this is good timing. And then, as I mentioned, we have rental groups as well. I'm going to hang up. Okay, I'm back. So we have rental groups, and we normally have about 30 rental groups, and that brings in about $450,000 that we couldn't bring in this year. So we were scrambling, and I mentioned we did a 5K. We were no way going to ever do a 5K again. We've done 2 in the past. The last one that we did, it poured out the entire time. The New Jersey State Troopers were supposed to shut down the roads for us, and they never showed up, so we had runners running between cars on the road. Overall, that was a lot of work, and we said we're never going to do that again. But then once we had to go virtual with things this year, we wanted, you're going to hear me keep saying during this, we wanted something simple and quick. So this walk that we did was a get-rich-quick scheme that didn't really get us rich, but it gave us exactly what we needed. So obviously we needed things to be remote and safe, cost effective. We didn't know what our financials were going to look like, so we didn't want a lot of overhead. It had to be easy to plan. So I was furloughed as the camp director for a couple months during this time, and our director so we needed to do this very quickly without a lot of work because we didn't have a lot of manpower behind it. We wanted it to be engaging. We wanted our community to know that we were still here. And we felt like we wanted an event that was active because now that camp was canceled, everybody was going online with things. We wanted people to get out and to get going, kind of like they would have at camp. So these are the formats that we had. We ended up doing 2 virtual walks. One was over Memorial Day weekend and one was over Labor Day weekend. We had no plans on doing a second walk until the first one was super successful and super easy for us. And I'm going to get around to, you know, which weekend I would prefer to do things in the future. There's definitely a benefit to both. So we had $10 per person, which was a super low cost for us. So our events are normally much more than that, in the 3 figures. So this was only $10 because we were keeping things super easy. We didn't have a lot of overhead costs, and really we just wanted to engage as many people as we could. So that's why we did $10, but we left an option for an additional donation. And what we came to find was that because the price was so low, people were used to paying more, so they did an extra donation. So over half of the people that registered for this race ended up doing an additional donation that oftentimes was $100 or more. So that was a big thing that we did that was super successful. Then when you registered as a runner, you could participate individually or you could participate as a team. In the next slide, I'm going to talk about the team aspect. I think that was the #1 reason our walks were successful. Hattie touched on it this morning about the importance of peer-to-peer fundraising, and that's what the team aspect did for us. And then, like I mentioned, we didn't want overhead costs, so we didn't send out any medals because it was just a walk. We did have special prizes, so we had best costume, and somebody dressed up like Raggedy Ann and did their walk. We had the furthest walker from camp, which was somebody from Australia. The most fun route, somebody took the map on their Fitbit and they spelled out HIC on their streets. We did a fundraiser, and somebody was a try-hard and ran a marathon, so they did the most miles walked over the weekend. So, like I mentioned earlier, our focus was on simplicity. We didn't get any sponsors because we had a quick turnaround time. It was May, we had Camp in the Box coming up, we had virtual camp coming up, so we needed money as quickly as possible. A lot of times sponsors, you know, they'll talk it over a little bit, so we needed money right away. We also depend on mostly small local businesses, and at the time, it was still early on in the pandemic where a lot of our businesses around here weren't even open yet, so we didn't really want to ask them. But the sponsors are the easiest thing to add to make the race even more successful. As I mentioned, we didn't have a race platform because it was just a walk, so there was no timing component. We weren't giving out medals. And that saved us hundreds to even thousands of dollars. In the past, I think we spent over $1,000 on a race platform. Somebody came and did timing. So if you're just doing a walk, you don't need a timing component. You don't need a race platform. Like Camp did, we did everything straight through our website, and that was super beneficial to us to keep everything in-house. And then I mentioned we didn't give any shirts or medals, which means that we didn't have to print. We didn't have to spend time designing the shirts. We didn't have to spend time packaging the shirts. So at that point, we had already put together our Camp in the Box packages. I'm sure anybody that did Camp in the Box now realizes how much work actually goes into packaging and shipping those out. So we saved all that time on our end, and we saved any shipping costs, which let us keep our registration costs down as well. So Grassroots Marketing is what we depended on. We didn't even send out any emails to our donors. To be honest, I don't really know why we didn't send out any emails. Obviously, that would help in the future, but we really relied on social media posts. What you see is what we posted on social media. We have about 1,000 people that like our Facebook page, about 500 people that follow us on Instagram, and that's really all we use. We would send out this graphic, and we rely on people sharing, spreading the word, and then the team registrations is really what made this 2 successful events. So when you would register, on the registration form, you would have an option to type in your team name. So we had 2 different people individually register over 100 people themselves. And that was so great because it spread the word about camp to people who had no idea we existed. It got our camp community super engaged. So you see here, she's holding a sign that says Team Boardwalk. That was our board president's team. And she made these signs and sent them out. So then other people were getting involved. They were taking pictures everywhere. We now have pictures. We have people that we didn't even know existed, and that peer-to-peer was definitely the best thing that we did with either of the events. And then those are just the simple registration form components. It was super easy. It was basically a contact form, contact information, the number of walkers you were registering, the team name, optional additional donation, which I mentioned definitely I suggest doing because over 50% of people did it, and then the payment information, which went through our normal, on our website, we have the donation tab. The payment information was just basically an extension of that. These were the results, and you see there we have Raggedy Ann doing her elliptical virtual walk. So our goal was only to raise $2,000. We basically needed to raise some emergency money to send out supplies for Camp in the Box. We really only wanted and expected 100 walkers. Over Memorial Day weekend, we raised over $10,000 and had 415 walkers. And then Labor Day weekend, we had $5,000 and 150 walkers. So obviously the price points weren't huge, but when you go down to the next bullet point, our expenses were only $200 per race. And the event only took, we started planning 3 weeks in advance. The planning itself only took 4 hours. And the longest part was acknowledging the donors. That took 3 to 4 days, but that's a good problem to have. So essentially, it took us as long as it would to write a grant, right? You spent half a day writing a grant, and we raised about as much money that a grant would. But then these additional benefits are what really made it worth it. Our Facebook page grew by 6%. We were getting flooded with messages every day and people wishing us the best through the pandemic. We have nearly 75 new emails for future campaigns, and that's a number that we could have had a lot more. I'll touch on that in the next slide with my recommendations. Our community was super engaged, and especially our campers. I was actually shocked, but we had about 7 to 10 campers start their own teams under their own names, and they got their parents to donate and everything. But then they got their friends involved. They were walking on the street. They were wearing their Happiness is Camping shirts, and they felt like they were a part of something. They felt like they were helping out camp. So just passing on that stewardship was a really good thing that we saw. Over 50% of walkers donated extra, and the majority of walkers that we had no prior connection to camps. Now we have all these new people that we can send appeals to in December, and we can invite to future events. So this is my last slide. These are my recommendations. You see what we did. We did the most bare bones virtual walk that you could possibly do. So keeping it simple does work, but you can customize it to your capabilities. So if we had more time, the first thing we would do is we would go after more sponsorships. As number 2 said, we think we could have easily quadrupled what we did if we went after sponsorship. So I do think we're going to do this again next year, and we're going to get sponsors ahead of time to help out with that. But so the next point is host your walk in the spring. So what we found is the Memorial Day walk, people were registering all over the place. You know, we were all locked down starting in March. People wanted to get outside. It was some of the first events that were popping up. They really wanted to do something, feel like they were a part of something, and get outside in the good weather. And so I think that's why that Memorial Day walk was much more successful than the Labor Day walk. So the Labor Day walk, obviously, we already did another walk, so there was kind of virtual walk fatigue at that point. But then I really think it was mostly because a lot of people were out all summer, so they didn't necessarily need things to do anymore like they did over Memorial Day weekend. Emphasize the team registrations. That's probably the most important point. Avoid using race platforms unless you need a timing component. Keeping the entry fees low was super critical to us because it got even our campers got involved. If you don't have any overhead costs, you really don't need to boost up your costs. I think on the supply and demand curve, we were pretty much near where we wanted it to be. And then our biggest mistake that we did is we didn't announce for all walkers. So we had the people who would register a dozen walkers at a time. We would only take their email. So even though we had maybe 12 walkers registered, we only had one email out of that 12. So when we do this in the future, I would say ask for everybody's email when they register, so then you can get even more new people. But even with us making that mistake, we still got about 75 new emails, which was pretty big for us.
Excellent. Well, congratulations, Ryan. That's pretty amazing that your goal was 100 walkers and the numbers that you had and your financial goal in raising 15,000. So I think that's a great example of how complex an event can be versus how simple an event can be and how successful it can be. So thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's a great perspective for others to hear. So next we have Juliana from Campout and Trillium to talk about the Campout that they have coordinated. So Juliana, go ahead.
Thanks so much, Hattie. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here today. I'm definitely newer to COCA, so I'm so excited to represent Campout and Camp Trillium and to talk about Campout for Cancer. So I'm going to share my screen here. Just bear with me a moment. Hopefully everyone can see that there. So yeah, I wanted to talk to you about Campout for Cancer this year. So in my role at UCH and Trillium, I work as a Senior Development Coordinator, currently of Donor Engagement. Great. There we go. So UCH and Trillium, we're located in Toronto and Hamilton and all of Ontario up in Canada. We just merged in 2020, so officially at the beginning of this year. So it's been an interesting year for us, I would say. And we do year-round programs. So we have our community programs. We're in multiple hospitals across Ontario, and we have 3 overnight camps, including UCH Muskoka. And yeah, we bring this magic of camp to over 1,900 children, 745 families from across Ontario each year, and at absolutely no cost to them. As with many folks, we shifted our programs and we did virtual camp programs since COVID happened this year. So a little bit about Campout for Cancer. It's really about celebrating all things camp. It's historically supported Camp Trillium, so this was the first year that it's supporting both of our organizations, or us as a merged organization. It's an annual month-long challenge, which took place in August this year. And we released weekly challenges for our campers or participants. So as an example, week 1, we had our theme as enjoy the great outdoors. Week 2, it was light up the night. And we would release through email to participants or social media to all folks this theme each week. What we really worked hard on was building the brand identity for the event. So the logo that we have there was new for this year, having a consistent brand and look for all of our assets, all of our communications, email, our website, etc. It's a peer-to-peer, do-it-yourself fundraising event, and we had both teams and individuals register as well. We provided them with resources like a camper toolkit to tell them what the event was about, and some ideas on how they could host their camp out. We kept it at no registration fee for folks this year, and we had a $50,000 fundraising goal. So what you can take a look at here, I just did a quick snapshot of what our website looked like, campoutforcancer.com. And we did a complete redesign on this for this year. The platform we used was for registration, fundraising, and then all of the event information as well. And this was on our platform, Engaging Networks, which manages all of our, which is what we use to do, I would say 99% of our fundraising events as well. So it's been a great tool for us. So our goal in making this website was really to make it interactive and engaging. And Engaging Networks is a newer platform for our organization. We've had it for about 2 years now. So with each event, we've been able to figure out new things that the platform does and really customize this, the look and feel of the website, use some different tools and really make it a personalized site. So a little bit more about Campout for Cancer. We really began building out the event concept back in March and early April. COVID was really just beginning, and we had absolutely no idea how long this would impact us at the time. So from our event concept, when we really started implementing this to when we had the event here in August, we changed course many times. Our virtual programs at the time didn't exist. And so, as I mentioned, our event audience strategies, it's changed many times over. So what I did here is I compared a little bit as to what our previous years looked like and what 2020 looked like for us. The interesting thing is that Campout for Cancer has always been a virtual event, but that looked very different for us this year compared to in the past. So like I mentioned, it was the first year supporting us as a merged organization. What we did change this year, and that was feedback from some participants as well as from staff members and volunteers who had worked on the event in the past. It used to be a one-day camp out in October. So we would host, it was typically our Canadian Thanksgiving long weekend, which is coming up next week. And that's typically when it would happen. And we shifted that to be a month-long challenge. So it had more of a campaign feel. And to incorporate how we bring people together, we decided to have an opening and a closing campfire for this event. So for the amount raised in the past, it's been a huge range of fundraising. It's gone anywhere between $30,000 and $93,000, which is quite a scope. And this year, as I mentioned, our goal is $50,000. To date, we've raised just slightly under that. In terms of registrants, one approach that they took in the past was that individuals weren't tracked. You registered yourself as a team. So we had between 30 and 34 teams in the past. And this year we had 83 individuals. We really encouraged individual registration so that folks could have their own fundraising page within our event platform, but then could also fundraise as a team. So we had 83 individuals and 19 teams. In the past, our audience has really been families. And this year we wanted to include our families as well, but as well including our volunteer community. Those were our focused areas where we wanted to have folks. Initially, when we talked about the event concept, we really wanted to engage more of a young adult community and have some net new supporters. But because of resources and because of this pandemic, that was something that we deemed wasn't possible throughout it. Because it was an event, we of course did not engage volunteers. And a couple of other event elements and some differences between 2020 and past events is that previously there was really a large focus on sponsorship and prizing. So for different fundraising levels, teams were awarded fundraising prizes. They partnered with Air Canada for a large prize for the top fundraisers, and then there was multiple different levels of that. We did move away from that and brought out more fundraising incentives, or swag as we called it. And we did engage one media sponsor, but found that reaching out to other sponsors for this event wasn't really successful and wasn't where we decided to put our focus for this year. They had also used an external fundraising platform, more of a flow through to do fundraising in the past. And of course, this year we were able to use our own fundraising platform, Engaging Networks, which really allowed us to do a lot of customization. It allowed us to track our donors a lot better, to thank them better, and made things a little bit easier on the administrative side for us. In terms of communications, and particularly with our event launch, we did send emails to past participants, volunteers, and key community members. We did a lot on social media, and we also did some personalized calls and emails to our key past fundraisers. And once we originally launched the event, we also followed up with calls to our past participants to engage them. We had a lot to communicate with them between our merger and also this event and virtual programs. So there was a lot happening this year, and we really tried to make that more of a personal follow-up for folks. One other thing I would wanted to mention is that we did engage a volunteer committee, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment as well. Once we had the event, some of the things that we did to celebrate success was through our virtual closing campfire. We did, of course, a thank you email to participants, and throughout the campaign, we also did thank you calls to our donors and fundraisers, which was a really great touch point for us in terms of just saying thank you and not doing a call with an ask. So up there, I've included a little bit of a snapshot of the fundraising swag that we did for qualifying participants once they reach different levels of fundraising. So some of our challenges that we encountered here was really with participant recruitment. So as you do with events, we definitely encountered some of these challenges, and not all of them were pandemic related. As I've mentioned, we're going through a big period of transition at Camp Ouch and Camp Trillium. And this was one of the first signature events that we launched as supporting both Ouch and Trillium. So we've been really working this past year to marry both of our organizations within this merger. So it's been an interesting year, and events have been a lot of our bread and butter. Community events and third-party fundraisers are huge for us as our signature event. So this was one of the first of those. I'll touch a little bit more on participant recruitment, because although the event has always been virtual, it was promoted in person at a lot of our programs. So that was interesting in how we communicated with those families to recruit them and to have them participate in this event. So that challenge was in reaching out to historically Camp Trillium volunteers, but then we also had a great opportunity in engaging some new audiences from Camp Ouch with this great event. And one of the ways that we worked to overcome this was engaging that committee of our program volunteers. So we engaged both historically Trillium and Ouch volunteers, and we really put effort into ensuring both were represented. We held virtual meetings, provided volunteers with specific tasks to accomplish between those meetings. I connected one-on-one with them often. And one of the great things that we looked to them for was idea generation. One of our other challenges as well here was that with Camp Ouch, we were coming off of a big push to our volunteer community and families for another peer-to-peer event. The Sporting Life 10K is a massive event that typically raises over $2 million for Camp Ouch. And we had just come off the heels of that in May. So having this launch in July and August was a little bit of a challenge in terms of participant recruitment for us. And then the event concept, folks didn't really know what we were asking them to do in some ways. What does camping out mean? Like, what do you want us to do? How am I supposed to do this and raise money? So that was the question we got a lot. And how we encountered that was we worked to create a video to show how you can camp out, shared other participants. We engaged our committee to film themselves doing a specific camp out. So it was a really fun way to engage different members from our community and clarify a little bit of that confusion. Also happening at the same time were our virtual programs, which led to confusion between what the event was, who we were engaging, and what our virtual programs were. And to be honest, I don't have an answer of how we encountered that. It was a lot of one-on-one conversations, but unfortunately it's something we really encountered throughout that time. And we also had a bit of a broad audience. So one thing we found, especially when we talked about those opening and closing campfires, were how do we make this a quick 30-minute activity where we're engaging young kids. We had some of our campers and their families participate, some older folks, and some teenagers and some young adults. It was a challenge that I think we have some learnings for next year. Just in the last few minutes, I'll quickly go through some of our tips and our learnings that I haven't touched on yet. So number one, I'd really understand your target audience. We had a broad audience. And this kept shifting for us as the pandemic continued, as we launched virtual programs. So really having a great understanding of who you're going to target will help you build your communications as well. For us, some internal cross collaboration was really important within our organization. We're very mindful at Trillium of communications with all of our stakeholders, but particularly when making asks of our families. So it was really important for us to have buy-in from all of our departments, all of our teams, when communicating with families and volunteers. We also work closely with our programs department for them to identify volunteers for our committee, folks who had previously put their hand up. Another thing I would really encourage is to plan ahead, but be flexible and ready to adjust. So creating as much as you can, as much collateral, as many of your communications ahead of time so that they're ready to go, and you can spend that time during the event and campaign adjusting as needed with whatever new COVID related or not response that we have, and that you can spend that time really working with stakeholders, recruiting, stewarding, recognizing folks who are participating. For us, it helped us also to use our planning tools. So critical path, email lists and content lists, creative assets list, as we're all still navigating this work from home environment. In Toronto, we are all still working from home at this point. Those are the things that helped us to internally stay on track and collaborate together. And thanking donors and fundraisers, that was really important for us as well. As I mentioned, we called our fundraisers and our donors throughout the campaign to say thank you. They're surprised and delighted to just hear from us and hear about what's happening with camp and what their donation is really contributing towards. I also really included clearly define the event aspects. It was a gray area when you're talking about camping out for cancer, not so gray of an area necessarily when you're talking about a walk or a run or anything like that. And it may not apply across the board, but we found it was a really great experience to engage our volunteers, not only as a committee, but as fundraisers. We had a specific group that really knocked it out of the park. They essentially organized their own events within this event. So they had, they called themselves Campout for Counselors, and they had some events that they worked with others to organize virtually. And it was overall just a really great experience where they really took initiative. One thing that didn't really work for us was that fundraising swag. With other peer-to-peer events, we found it was really successful and it motivated folks to get to those different levels. And we didn't find that was a great motivator here. So it's certainly something that we're taking back and looking at how we'd like to change in the next year. And again, just wanted to say thank you so much. My email is up there, and you can always contact us if you have any questions about Campout or Trillium, or any of those. So thank you so much for having me.
Good. Thank you so much. I thought that this was a great way to wrap up because this was an existing virtual event that when you really had to become virtual, that you had to make some changes. So it's just nice to see, we saw an event that was in person for many, many years and became virtual. One that Ryan's camp, created a virtual event for the first time, and then Juliana's, who was already a virtual event, and just the changes and pivoting that you had to do within that event that was already virtual. So I think it was a really nice overview of lots of events and great ideas. And we're going to open it up now for chats or for questions, excuse me. If anybody has any questions that you want to ask, what I would ask is one, in the chat box, make sure your to is to everyone so we can all see the question, and just say gala, walk, or camp out before your question so we know who it is directed towards. And we do have about 10 minutes. So if you do have questions, feel free. If you don't have questions, or if you want to ask them offline, you can do that as well. But I do want to give just a moment for people to be able to ask some questions that we can address. And then before you sign off, we'll wait till our questions wrap up, but there is an exit poll that we want to ask everyone to do. So we'll, let's see what questions we have. So if we already use Give Smart, is it helpful to attend tonight, or is it more geared towards potential new users? So tonight's session is really a follow-up to what the conversation was this morning, what we just talked about today. So they're really going to cover, as an organization, just best practices when it comes to virtual events. So some of it will be complementary to what we've already heard today. And in particular, they're a company that does this all the time. Like, their business just relies on virtual events and things being online. So they'll have a lot of great insight. So I would say, even though you already use them, it would be well worth it, because again, our focus is really on virtual events. What are the best practices? How is it best to communicate with people, to encourage participation, things like that. And there is a very short, when I spoke with him yesterday, maybe 5 or 10-minute session where they're going to actually show the platform. So that's not the majority of their presentation tonight. So I think it would definitely be worth using or attending, because it's not just solely selling their platform. They're really going to go over the best practices, and then also just show you a brief demo of their platform. So because what our goal was, is we wanted to give you guys the concepts, give you real life examples, and then give you a tool that you can actually go back to your camp and say, okay, I've learned everything I need to know. I got great ideas from the 3 camps. Now I want to implement it. And so instead of being like, I don't know where to start, we thought sharing a platform with you would be a good first step. Again, there's tons of platforms out there and softwares that you can use. This is just one that you can choose from. So I hope that answered your question. Perfect. Well, I don't see any other questions coming through. So Jennifer, if you want to pop up the exit poll, that would be really great. And if everybody could fill this out, and once you fill it out, feel free to sign off. We hope that you'll join us again tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern time. And again, it's with 2 gentlemen from Give Smart, and that will wrap up our first day of the COCA Academy. Mark your calendars. The second day is on October 21st, and it's all going to be, oh, Don, I think. Oh, that's tonight's session. Perfect. Thank you, Don. And then it's going to be everything peer-to-peer fundraising on October 21st. So thank you all very much.